when the red, red robin comes bobbing along, along. There'll be no more sobbing when he starts throbbing his old sweet song. Wake up, you sleepyhead.
Today's story, Lovebirds by Jessie, Bate, is about Mari. Now, she's been jilted by Simon, perfume-wearing scoundrel. In fact, you could say she's been given the bird by this wretch. And this is highly relevant because it's through Mari's feathered friends that she eventually wins through and weeps no more. Our author Jessie Bate of South Australia is a true and long-time friend of this program. I'm your reader, Kim Dodsworth. Nervous? What for? They're lovely people, simple and natural. Something about Bill's choice of words sent a chill down Mari's spine. Middle of winter! Look at me, she thought, gazing moodily at the mirror. Seaman's jersey, jeans, rubber boots, anorak, woolly gloves. Tim, her young brother, came in. Don't look so miserable. You'll have a great time. All that fresh air. You come too? She asked, hopefully. Too busy. It's Richmond versus Geelong on the telly. Don't forget your binoculars. Gee, you look sexy. The doorbell rang much too loudly. Ready, Mari, said Bill Jenner, their next-door neighbour, healthily. It's a super day, caroled Mavis, his wife, from their old ute. Super, she echoed, but feebly. A grey mist hung about, veiling the pale sun. Mari climbed into the ute, sat down firmly on the seat, and wished she hadn't. It was upholstered with concrete. And all this because a certain gentleman loved to wear humani. Gentleman? Well, Simon. Tall as a steeple, thin as a goalpost, eyes that took her heart, turned it inside out, and hung it from the furthest star. Simon, all the colour, all the light in the world, and now shining for Ellie from the deli. Simon, who always smelled of humani. Stop moping, Mum had said. Get yourself a new interest. Forget him. He isn't worth it, Tim advised. He was a rotten skunk. That Ellie's got hairy armpits. Right, he was a skunk, but every disco smelled of humani. The coffee bars and bars were full of shapely, pale gold heads, so like Simon's, they twisted the heart out of her body. All right, she thought. Another interest, is it? Well, let it be a healthy outdoor one, where the fellas all smell of leather and horses and mud, and nothing reminds... But bird-watching! What had possessed her? True, she knew a wedge-tailed eagle from a magpie, just. But did she have to join the local bird-watchers and go off with them to the salt marshes on a cold winter morning? She must need her head examining. By a woodpecker. The ute slowed to a standstill in 3 inches of slushy mud. A cluster of muffled-up bird-watchers stood around, chattering in muted tones, like starlings in a cathedral, as though they feared they might disturb a passing greater feathered cockyoly bird. A gloved hand touched hers. She looked into the earnest eyes of Primrose, the local minister's wife. "Have a peppermint," she hissed. "Keep out the cold." She looked at her palm. In the transference, the peppermint had gathered fragments of fur fabric, Primrose's, and wool, hers. Surreptitiously, she ground it into the mud at her feet. The bird-watchers were still hissing at each other. They sounded like punctured airbeds. She had an insane picture of them subsiding slowly and flatly into rubbery heaps. She recognized Keith and his wife Millicent, last seen at an ecology demo, hung about with posters. They were gazing intently at something in Keith's hand. "Munchkin, darling," Keith hissed, "this means that their diet must include more grain than we thought." She looked and wished she hadn't. "Fascinating stuff. Birds excreta. Wonderful what you can learn from it." "Wonderful," she returned. Keith focused on her. "Of course, it's Mari. Bertram was asking after you. Said he hadn't seen you in years." Millicent beamed. "You wouldn't recognize him. He's so developed." Oh, yes, I would, she thought. I'd recognise Bertram if he wore a mask, which he should. 15 stone of goggle-eyed, stamp-collecting mania. She recalled him, cornering her at school, boring her socks off with his stamp collection. "He's coming down to pick us up afterwards," said Keith. "It'll be nice for you to meet him again." There was a hairy rug in Bill and Mavis's ute. She'd hide under it until Fatso had gone and taken his stamps with him. "We're off to the hide," hissed Bill. The hide was a hut with a narrow observation slit down one side and character-building wooden benches. Here the hissing faded and died. Trappist silence prevailed, broken only by ecstatic sighs as one of those brown birds appeared in the mud, doing something unremarkable. Hours passed. Barnacles grew on her bottom. At last there was a low whisper, a nodding of heads, and they all trooped out into the cold. "We're going down to the beach," said Bill happily. "Saw some bar-tailed godwits feeding there Friday." There was no reply to that she could think of, so she followed in silence. On the beach the wind came in like iced razors. The men produced strips of waterproof canvas. They all lay down in the dubious shelter of a ridge of marsh grass. Correction, semi-waterproof canvas. She felt wetness working its way through at elbow, hip and knee. Why had she thought the hide uncomfortable? It had been sinful luxury. She recalled the remains of a chocolate bar in her pocket. She began to tear the paper off. Earnest faces turned to her, the hissing changing to a long-sustained shh. She crammed the chocolate into her mouth defiantly. Detaching a bit of foil with her tongue engrossed her. Only gradually did she notice a stirring among the Trappists. "Marvellous," breathed Keith. "What luck," murmured Bunchkins. "Just wonderful," mouthed Mavis. "Wonderful," Mari returned cravenly. Then she pulled herself together. "Don't let them intimidate you, girl," she thought. What was it? 8 pairs of eyes left 8 pairs of binoculars. They swivelled in her direction like a horde of roving Daleks moving in to exterminate. "A red-necked avocet," said Keith, in the reverent tones of one might say, "His Holiness the Pope." "Didn't see a thing," she returned brazenly. Shivers ran through the ranks. Soulful eyes filled with sorrow. No, it was not a papal visit she had missed. It was the second coming, at least. "Perhaps it'll come back," Bill offered, hopefully. Perhaps, she thought. Perhaps it will, perhaps it won't. What she would really have liked to see was a hefty, greater, unfeathered hamburger flying over, with mustard. She was wet, cold, and hungry. She thought longingly of the mint in a hairy vest she had consigned to a muddy grave. Something spiteful bit her cheek. She rubbed, then realised that her glove was covered in mud. Well, at least there were no dishy blokes around. Hunger and thirst developed into a raging monster. This was the longest, coldest, wettest day she had ever spent. Would it ever end? She turned her thoughts, trying to summon up more attractive mental pictures. Hot pies, hot showers, hot buttered toast. It only made matters worse. The Trappists called time, rose and folded their prayer mats. Back they went to the car park. Among the mud-spattered vans, utes and station wagons, the Porsche stood out like a well-manicured thumb amid a hand of dirty fingernails. Inside it, a dim figure stirred. "Here's our Bertram," gurgled Millicent, smiling fondly. The dim figure emerged from the Porsche, unfolding its impressive length. It couldn't be. "Mari, come here and say hello to Bertram." It was. White teeth flashed in a strong, friendly face. "Hello there. Nice to see you again." Somehow she had abandoned Bill and Mavis. She was sitting in front of the Porsche next to Bertram. In the back, Keith and Millicent were deep in birdie chit-chat. Bertram said quietly, Come out for a meal tonight. Ages since I saw you. I've got rid of the stamp collection. 2 hours later, he was looking at her approvingly. I thought there must be a girl somewhere, under all that mud, he remarked, but nicely. She looked back at him levelly. I should have known there was a thin boy under all that. He winced. Don't remind me. In the car, she noticed a familiar smell and sniffed appreciatively. It's Humani, he said. I hope you don't mind it. My favourite, she said, and settled back. The stars were coming out. There wasn't a bird in sight, not even a turtle dove. But who needed birds anyway? Well, I'm sure you all enjoyed Lovebirds by Jessie Bate. I certainly enjoyed reading it. Please join us again this time next week when I'll have another short story of quality for you. I'm Kim Dodsworth.
I'm just a kid again, doing what I did again, singing a song. When the red robin comes bobbing along.